Let's deepen the discussion now on the dramatic events in the U.S. as His Excellency Ambassador Usman Sariki, former Deputy Representative of Nigeria to the United Nations, joins us now. Glad to have you, Ambassador. All right. When you were watching the events that played out at the Capitol, a normal routine exercise that eventually sort of turned into a spectacle of sorts with violence, how did you feel? And this was happening in America, what went through your mind?
Well, it is, first of all, a very melancholy sight for the whole world to see the hallowed chambers, the temple of democracy, being so rudely invaded and violated in such a manner. It was very shocking, and beyond that, it was very distressing to all reasonable people all over the world, particularly those of us who see America as the bastion of democracy, liberties, and human rights, advancement in the world. All these myths have been busted yesterday, and the hope and expectations of the world of a smooth transition has been actually undermined by yesterday's action. So America is in shock, and the rest of the world is in surprise.
Okay, former ambassador or ambassador, might I suggest that the events of yesterday threw up questions about maybe protests and insurrection and inclusion and what people are now branding being an outlaw, and that perhaps we ignore these weighty discussions at our own peril. So I want you to maybe draw an analogy between these issues and what we're suffering here in terms of insecurity, where you have a lot of people who feel excluded, possibly threatening the security of the country here in Nigeria.
Yes, thank you very much. Analogies can always be drawn between and among incidences, but the analogies have to be appropriate and historically contextualized. What happened in America, in Washington yesterday, was a mob action inspired by the top hierarchy of the government, particularly the President of the United States of America. So the distinction is that this was not an organized mob action coming from nowhere. It was premeditatedly acted incident that was incited by the American president, by Rudy Giuliani, by some senators and extreme right-wing movements leaders in America. Now, in terms of our situation in Nigeria, I think, there is a lot of things to say about the way the people perceive what democracy should be. Democracy is not license. Democracy is not absolute liberty to do what everybody likes. Democracy is founded on the rule of law and order. And I think in Nigeria, we have failed to connect the two, the rule of law and maintenance and upholding of order and the enjoyment of civil liberties. And the other issue about Nigeria is, I think, the incapacity of the state to deal with existential issues on time and within their appropriate situations. The sum total of the failure of governance, if I may say so, in Nigeria since 1979 is the failure of government to apply or implement Chapter 2 of our Constitution. If Chapter 2 of our Constitution had been faithfully implemented by the successive governments, situations in Nigeria would not have deteriorated thus far, because security does not simply entail physical security of lives and property, but also what the United Nations define as holistic security. That is freedom from fear, freedom from want, and the upholding of the dignity of the person. So it's important for us to contextualize whatever we are saying within time and space.
Where does all these leave the president, who has just 13 days more to stay in the office? I'm talking about the President Donald Trump. Former Foreign Minister of Nigeria, Professor Bolaji Akinyemi, said what happened is practically treason. Do you see it the same way?
Well, for me, I think I see it as an irrational act by a desperate person. He lost, he refused to concede, and he incited the whole country against itself. So irrationality, I think, explains better what has happened. He thought that he was acting within his right and within the law, having conceived for himself that he won the elections. Now, what happens to him actually is in the hands of the Congress and the American people and the American establishment. If the American Congress and the establishment decide to invoke 25th Amendment of the Constitution, Section 4 in particular, they can. The Senate, the House of Representatives, and the executive arm, the administration, can write to the acting president of the Senate to declare the incapacity of the president or his inability, and he will be removed on the basis of the 25th Amendment, especially Section 4. So in the next 16 days, if he withdraws, that is President Trump withdraws from his irrational position and thinks calculatedly, he may douse the tension in the country and gain some respite for himself. And then on the 20th of January, go and gallantly, as a gentleman, shake President-elect Biden's hands and hand over the instruments of office to him. In doing so, he may retrieve the little that is left of his integrity and honor, and perhaps find peace with himself in one corner, either at Mar-a-Lago, his estate, or in his golf course, and to enjoy the rest of his life in peace.
Is he capable of doing that? That's the question someone would ask. Do you think that the president is capable of doing what you have just pointed out?
Well, so far from the look of things, I think he is withdrawing from the brink by saying that, declaring, although he didn't say directly, but his social media director tweeted on his behalf that he will ensure orderly transfer of power on the 20th. But irrationality also has its limit. When it leads the person to distraction, I think even an irrational man knows where to draw the red line and to withdraw from the brink.
Yes, we would hope so. But let's maybe turn our attention to, because I'm thinking that some people looking from the outside in would still be at a loss to understanding how one man could somehow override constitutional safeguards and hold the country hostage. And now, in the mode of drawing lessons from what happened, is it possible that even here in Nigeria, we need to be considering what constitutional safeguards we need to have in place so that whoever is in control or whoever is president, no matter their disposition, will not be in a position to hold the country hostage?
Quite so. Thank you, Madam. It's an excellent question. I think the important thing is for us to draw lessons from history. In 1933, Hitler came to power through democratic means. They did not take power by force. The Nazi Party and Hitler came to power through the ballot box. When President Hindenburg died, he declared himself the absolute ruler and gradually consolidated his position, declared other parties illegal and suppressed them. They banned the Reichstag, and there they really monopolized power and established the Nazi Party. And what happened in America in 2016 is somebody came through the back door unexpectedly, totally taking the Republican Party and the constituency by surprise, bulldozed his way into power, and caused this havoc in America. It can happen anywhere. So the important thing in Nigeria is for us to be vigilant. The guardians and protectors of democracy in Nigeria must be vigilant. Our constitution must be alive. It should not be a dead constitution. The operators of the constitution, the legal establishment, the executive, the judiciary, and the legislature must be alive to their responsibilities. Above all, Nigerian citizens need enlightenment to know their rights, responsibilities, and duties in order for democracy to thrive, to strengthen, and to advance by leaps and bounds in this country. The greatest mistake, or the deadliest mistake we will make, is to take things for granted, to say this will not happen in Nigeria. It will happen, it may happen, it can happen. Let us not relax our vigilance. The other thing is, we should eschew mob action. Mob action destroys rather than constructs. Mob action detracts from the national goal, from the national endeavor to achieve greatness. It reduces, it incapacitates a country. What we should emphasize is rational action based on enlightenment, based on consultation, based on arriving at consensus. The At-End-SARS movement was ill-conceived, I must say, and executed in such a way that it backfired and actually caused more harm to our communities, to our states and the country, than advancing the cause for which it was intended. Nevertheless, we should learn lessons from there. How do we strengthen democracy? We strengthen institutions. And also, we elect and put people who have the capacity, the discernment, the honor and integrity into office. Not just anybody who the party chants up or the political debris chants up, can come into office. No. We have to put monitoring mechanisms, checks and balances, and filtering systems. President Trump came to power because the filtering system in the Democratic Party was no longer working. He bulldozed his way there, he bought his way, he's bullied his way into power. And that is the result we are seeing. The Democratic Party stands culpable for standing by Trump, the Republican Party, stands culpable, and it can be condemned for standing by in the 4 years defending Trump blindly. And this is what has happened to the country, to America. And regrettably, America sets the fashion in many ways, including in politics. I do hope and pray that this will not be imbibed in a copycat fashion by other leaders in Africa and other parts of the world to entrain themselves and to subvert democracy in their own countries.
Now, one chapter is winding down, that of Donald Trump, and another chapter is opening up, that of President Joe Biden. How much of a task has Joe Biden got in terms of healing America? There's so much divisiveness in America today. How much of a task, and where should he begin from to begin to heal America?
Well, thank you very much. Yes, life is actually a book, isn't it? Chapter and verse and pages. Like you said, a new chapter is closed or is on the verge of closing. A new one is opening. The old one is closing. President Biden can draw from the wealth of experience he has in public life. 40 years or almost 40 years in the Senate, many other years, before that, in public service, and as vice president, 8 years. He knows what he can do. He knows what needs to be done. He is putting together a team, I call it the Rainbow Team in America, to really quickly establish the supremacy of the law, the rule of law, supremacy of the Constitution, and governance by consensus and by example. In doing so, he has promised that those who voted for him and those who did not vote for him, all of them will be one family, and he will gather America around certain ideals of democracy, of respect for the individuals, respect for rule of law and order, and bring about unity and healing in the country. If any man is called upon by history to take charge of America today, to draw that country from the brink, from the precipitate brink that Donald Trump has taken it to, it is President-elect Joe Biden. His age, his maturity, his integrity, his gentlemanly demeanor, and his experience in public service will all stand him in good stead to achieve this objective of unifying America. He is a white man, quite truly, but with empathy towards black people, Latinos, Indians, as you can see from the appointment he has made of his vice president, of his secretaries, various heads of his government, and so forth. There is hope for America with President Joe Biden at the helm of affairs. He will steer the ship of state to calmer waters until they reach a point where the Trump legacy or the 4 years of Trump will be just a nightmare in the memory of Americans, which they will really desperately pray to forget.
Okay, it's one thing for Americans to forget, but what about the world? And just staying with the theme of life being a book and turning over to a new chapter, what do you say about the voices we're hearing now that America's days as the, do you say, policeman of the world are over, and that they never truly merited that status in the first place, seeing as they've been, do you say, hypocritical at times? That's been the word out there. Do you feel that we should concede that now we're looking at a less unilateral, do you say, umpire status for America, and we're going to see players like China and even Russia come to the fore in deciding what is the key theme of democracy or whatever administration we're seeing globally?
Yes, thank you very much. I think, for too long, since 1945, America has straddled the world like a colossus, projecting itself everywhere, dictating the tune, and telling countries and other nations what to do. But since the end of the Cold War, where America emerged triumphant, they could not actually consolidate that moral, political, and military victory in terms of giving leadership to the world. What they did was to squander that opportunity by going to war in the Gulf, for instance, attacking Iraq twice, and fomenting unrest in places like Afghanistan and other parts of the world. The United States could not bring an end to the long-running dispute between Israel and Palestinians. The United States could not reconcile the two Koreas, North and South. The United States could not bring an end to the conflicts that is going on in Syria, in Yemen. They decided to actually take sides in these conflicts. So in doing so, by not playing the impartial arbiter, America actually, belittled itself and made itself irrelevant in many areas. A great power should eschew first and foremost its interests, conceal them, and at the same time appear an impartial arbiter in global affairs. Sadly, they did not do so. Instead, they persisted in interfering in the affairs of countries. The contrarian example is China. Despite rising tremendously in political, military, and economic power, China still conceals artfully its power, its tremendous power in global affairs, by claiming that it is a developing country, first and foremost, and by insisting the 5 principles of coexistence: non-interference in other governments' affairs, other countries' affairs, cooperation, collaboration along South-South lines, and so forth. So you can see the difference between the United States. One brazenly interferes in the affairs of other countries, albeit without much success, and the other concealing its power and cooperating and collaborating, almost making its interests subservient to the interests of other nations in the world in order to make a headway. So the age of America as a policeman of the world definitely is over. They cannot come to Nigeria, for instance, or Africa to teach us about democracy or human rights because of the racial questions that are really still unanswered, unresolved in America, the democratic questions that are unresolved in America, the fissures and the big gulf that is emerging between races and classes in that country. So by looking at America, we should also see ourselves in the mirror. Are we doing the right thing as a country or as a continent in Africa? And answer the question objectively and dispassionately. Have we built resilience in our country? Have we built strong institutions? Are we following our constitution in both in letter and spirit? Are we upholding the rule of law and human rights? Are we advancing economic progress of our country and our people? These are fundamental questions that we need to ask. Rather, we have allowed elite hysteria to take over the country in Nigeria and to set the agenda for us by going after trivia like tribal, regional, zonal interests rather than the national interest. So it is time now for Nigerians to wake up that the world does not owe us a favor or a living. We have to chart our own course. establish our priorities, know the direction in which we are going, and then start going without actually temporizing, without halting, looking back, and blaming each other. So the onus is on ourselves today.
Exactly. Thank you so much, Ambassador Osman Seraki, there for your interesting analysis on events playing out or played out in America.